Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a really major recent development in a case that, well, it's gripped the nation for years now. The tragic 2022 University of Idaho killings. And this isn't just looking back, it's about this pretty shocking news that just broke on June 30th, 2025. Bryan Christopher Kohberger, the accused in this horrific quadruple homicide, he's accepted a plea deal.
Yeah, it's huge news, and it really sends ripples through that community, Moscow, Idaho. It was remarkably quiet before all this. I mean, a rural college town hadn't had a murder since 2015. And then, bam, suddenly it's the center of this awful, awful crime. It changed everything there.
Exactly. And now this plea deal, it just completely shifts the ground again. So our mission today really is to unpack what this actually means, legally, sure, but maybe more importantly, what does it mean for the victims, for their families? What about the whole idea of justice in this case? How does it stack up against that massive investigation we saw, all that evidence, and the specific victims' rights laws in Idaho?
Okay, let's unpack this. But first, maybe we should quickly recap the crime itself, just to set the stage again.
Yeah, let's do that. So November 13th, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, they were all fatally stabbed in their rental house off campus, 1122 King Road. And what's just bone-chilling is that 2 other roommates, women, were actually in the house at the time. They thankfully survived unharmed.
And the scene investigators walked into was, well, incredibly brutal. The victims were found in their beds. Multiple stab wounds, mostly chest and upper body. They believe the weapon was a large knife, maybe something like a crowbar, military style. And the autopsies confirmed, at least one victim had defensive wounds. They fought back. Importantly, no signs of sexual assault. All 4 deaths ruled homicides by stabbing. Just horrific.
And the immediate aftermath in Moscow, it was just fear and chaos, wasn't it? The university shut down classes. You could feel the terror in the town, so much so that tons of students just left early for Thanksgiving break. They just wanted out.
Absolutely. And that fear, it was amplified because information was so hard to control. Remember, police first said no ongoing threat. Then they had to walk that back, saying, well, actually, we can't confirm that, which, just fuels anxiety. And then you had all the social media stuff, speculation, misinformation flying everywhere. Police actually called it a huge distraction. They even warned people about potential criminal charges for harassment.
Yeah.
It really shows how tricky that whole side of things can be during a major investigation like this.
Right. A total mess online. So from that chaos, this huge investigation kicks off. Moscow PD, Idaho State Police, the FBI. Nearly 130 people involved. And for weeks, nothing. No suspect, even with thousands of tips coming in. I think it was over 15,000 by late December 22. But then they got a break. What were those key pieces, the evidence that finally pointed towards Kohberger?
Well, the breakthrough really came down to a few critical forensic and investigative threads that meticulously started pointing to Bryan Kohberger. First, and maybe the biggest one, was the DNA. They found 3 unidentified male DNA samples at the scene. The crucial one was on a tan leather knife sheath, found right there on Madison Mogen's bed. So investigators used a public genealogy database. Clever stuff, got a familial match. And that genetic trail eventually led straight to Kohberger. And to nail it down, they got DNA from trash outside his family's place in Pennsylvania. And bingo, it was consistent with the DNA from that sheath. That was huge.
Wow. And the car, the white Elantra, that was everywhere in the news. How did that piece fit in?
Oh, yeah, the Elantra was massive. They put out that call looking for a white 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra. And sure enough, surveillance video showed a car matching that description, making multiple passes near the King Road house. Started around 3:29 a.m., came back at 4 a.m., then seen speeding away about 4:20 a.m., right in that critical window. And it turned out Kohberger, the PhD student nearby, owned a white Elantra matching that description. Placed him right there, right then.
And his cell phone data seemed to back that up too, didn't it? Connecting his movements around the time of the murders. What did that show?
It really did. His phone basically went dark, stopped connecting to the network over in Pullman, Washington, which is like less than 8 miles from Moscow, around 2:47 a.m. on the morning of the murders. Then it pops back up near Blaine, Idaho at 4:48 a.m. That timing fits eerily well with the car sightings. But it wasn't just that night. His phone pinged a tower near the victim's house later that morning around 9 a.m. And even more telling, it had pinged near there at least 12 times between June 2022 and that November. 12 times.
Yeah.
It suggests, maybe premeditation, maybe surveillance, not just a random one-off thing. That data was incredibly damning.
And then there was that chilling account from one of the surviving roommates. She actually saw the intruder. What did she say?
Yeah, that was a terrifying piece of testimony. She said she woke up, heard sounds, maybe someone saying, "There's someone here." heard crying later and a male voice saying something like, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Then she opened her door again and saw him. A man masked, all in black. She described him as not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. Said he walked right past her towards the back door. She was just frozen in shock, she said, then locked her door. Just horrifying to imagine.
Absolutely terrifying. So beyond the evidence, what about Kohberger himself, criminology PhD student, teaching assistant at WSU? Were there red flags before the arrest?
Well, yeah, some really unsettling details emerged. Like you said, criminology PhD student, TA at Washington State, right near Moscow. But get this, less than 2 weeks before the murders, faculty at WSU actually met with him specifically to discuss, quote, growing concerns and complaints about his behavior and conduct toward women. And then he was actually terminated from his TA job on December 19th, citing his behavior and performance overall. That definitely paints a disturbing picture leading up to all this.
Wow, okay. And the arrest itself, the details around that seem pretty significant too, right?
They really did. December 30th, 2022, FBI SWAT team, Pennsylvania State Police. They grab him at his parents' house back east. They find him in the kitchen. He's wearing examination gloves, sorting trash into separate Ziploc baggies. I mean, that immediately screams someone trying not to leave DNA, right? And a search turns up a knife, a pistol, a black face mask. Plus, investigators noted his car had been meticulously cleaned inside and out. It all suggested someone very aware of forensics, which fits his studies, and actively trying to cover his tracks.
Here's where it gets really interesting. All that evidence, it seemed like a mountain. Many people, myself included, expected this long, complex trial, but now this plea deal changes everything. Let's get into that. So the absolute core of this new development, June 30th, 2025. Bryan Kohberger accepts a plea deal. He pleads guilty to all 4 counts of first-degree murder, plus the felony burglary charge. And in return, 4 consecutive life sentences. No chance of parole, but crucially, he avoids the death penalty.
Right. And the prosecution, specifically Bill Thompson, the Moscow prosecutor, laid out their reasoning pretty clearly in a letter to one of the families. They said the goal was to, quote, ensure that the defendant will be convicted, will spend the rest of his life in prison, and this is key, will not be able to put you and the other families through the uncertainty of decades of post-conviction appeals. So it's about finality. Locking in the conviction, locking him up forever, and avoiding that incredibly long, painful appeals process that always comes with a death sentence. That can drag on for literally decades.
And we should remember, this is a big shift, because initially he refused to enter a plea back in May 2023. Remember, the judge had to enter not guilty for him, and the prosecutors have been very clear up till now. They were seeking the death penalty. So this deal, yeah, it's a major turn.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, from a purely practical view, skipping a trial does avoid a certain kind of trauma. It means the families don't have to sit through weeks or months of testimony, reliving every horrific detail, seeing all the graphic evidence presented in open court. Yeah. That's something both sides, defense and prosecution, often weigh up when considering plea deals in cases like this. It avoids that specific public agony.
While it offers that legal finality, the impact on the victims' families has been just devastating for some. Kaylee Goncalves' family especially put out this, well, you called it a scathing statement. They said they are beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They have failed us. Just incredibly strong words.
Yeah. Their sense of betrayal is palpable. They've said publicly they were not consulted properly, maybe only vaguely told about a possible deal, and they felt blindsided when it was finalized, especially with the trial date, August 18th, 2025, getting so close. This really clashes with the prosecution saying victim viewpoints weighed heavily, and it throws a spotlight on how victims' rights work, or maybe don't work, in practice in Idaho. See, victims have rights, fairness, respect, notification, being heard at plea or sentencing hearings. It's in the Idaho Constitution, the state code. But, and this is the really hard part, for families violating those rights doesn't automatically let a court throw out the deal or the case. The prosecutor can make a deal even without the victim's okay, especially if the victim doesn't respond after being notified. It's a legal nuance that feels incredibly wrong when you're the family feeling unheard.
And Aubrey Goncalves, Kaylee's sister, she just laid bare that frustration. She said, the system has failed these 4 innocent victims and their families, end quote. It really hits home. Bryan Kohberger facing a life in prison means he would still get to speak, form relationships, and engage with the world. Meanwhile, our loved ones have been silenced forever. Well, that reality stings more deeply when it feels like the system is protecting his future more than honoring the victim's past. Wow, that's just raw. It speaks volumes about their desire for accountability, a feeling that justice wasn't fully served here.
It absolutely captures that deep tension between what the legal system sees as resolution and what families feel is actual justice or closure. And that leads right into this other big question a lot of people, including legal experts, are asking. What about the why? You had guys like Paul Morrow, Ted Williams, people with serious law enforcement background saying, look, any deal should have absolutely required a full confession. Explain when, how, and most importantly, why he did this. They argue he owes the families, owes the public that explanation. But it's still unclear if this specific deal includes that kind of detailed confession. The huge question might just remain unanswered.
So what does this all mean when you take a step back?
Well, it means justice is complicated, isn't it? Especially in cases this horrific. For the state, for the prosecution, this plea deal delivers certainty. Kohberger is convicted. He will die in prison. And they avoid those endless appeals that drain resources and keep wounds open for decades. It's a guaranteed outcome, legally speaking.
But for the families.
Yeah,
it's this incredibly tough spot. Okay, maybe they avoid the trauma of a trial, the graphic details being rehashed publicly. But on the other hand, like the Goncalves family so powerfully expressed, it can feel like justice denied, like the ultimate penalty or even just the full truth, the why, has been traded away. It's a type of closure, maybe, but it feels like one forced upon them, leaving this bitter taste, this sense of being failed by the system that was supposed to deliver justice for their loved ones. And maybe that leaves us and you listening with this final thought to wrestle with. In our justice system, which values process, finality, what really counts as justice, as closure for people whose lives have been shattered by such violence? Is guaranteeing a conviction, avoiding those appeals, always the right answer? Does it outweigh seeking the ultimate punishment? Or maybe just getting that full, agonizing truth about why something so terrible happened? It seems even when the legal chapter closes, the deepest questions can echo on for the families left behind.